Want to speak real Italian from your first lesson? Sign up for your free lifetime account at ItalianPod101.com.
Hi guys, welcome back to Italian Pod 101. My name is Desiree, mi chiamo Desiree, but you can call me Daisy, ma potete chiamarmi Daisy. And today we're gonna learn about frequency adverbs in Italian, avverbi di frequenza. First of all, let's say that as in English, you can use them with the present tense. And starting with the highest level of frequency, we have sempre, which is always.
Sempre, sempre.
For example, io faccio sempre colazione alle 8. I always have my breakfast at 8. Position-wise, you put them after the verb. Sometimes maybe you will hear io faccio colazione alle 8 sempre, but that's just a way to put emphasis on the last part of the phrase, so sempre. But usually it goes after the verb. Sometimes this adverb has the meaning of usually. Let's say, for example, faccio sempre colazione alle 8, ma nel weekend alle 9. Literally means I always have my breakfast at 8, but during the weekend at 9. So it's not always, of course, it's just like 5 days out of 7. And in that case, you would probably translate that as I usually have breakfast at 8, but during the weekend at 9. But yeah, it's still sempre. So if you do something always, but not really, kind of always, you can also say quasi sempre, almost always.
Spesso, spesso.
If you want to say often, we use spesso. Faccio spesso colazione al bar. I often have my breakfast at the bar. Another way to say often is frequentemente, frequentemente, but it's a bit more formal, I would say. If I talk to my friends, I would just use spesso. And be careful, because sometimes you hear the same word, spesso, but it also means thick. For example, this book is really thick. Questo libro è molto spesso. It's exactly the same word. It just has two meanings, okay? And a funny way of saying, I mean, it's not funny, it's just something that I like, is spesso e volentieri, which literally means often and gladly, often and happily. And yeah, it does mean that you do that happily, but I would translate it more as more often than not, so something that happens more than often, but not always. For example, vado spesso e volentieri al bar rosso. I go more than often to Bar Rosso, or I go to Bar Rosso often and gladly, if you prefer to think like that. Guardo spesso e volentieri I video di Desiree. I often watch Desiree's videos, and I enjoy them. Moving on to sometimes, we have different ways to say that, but one of the most common is ogni tanto.
Ogni tanto, ogni tanto.
Literally means every now and then. Ogni tanto faccio colazione al bar, so sometimes I have breakfast at the bar. And ogni is really a useful word because you can combine it with everything as every in English. Ogni giorno, every day. Vado al mare ogni estate. I go to the sea every summer. While if something happens less than every now and then, I would say raramente, rarely.
Raramente, raramente.
Perfect example for spesso e volentieri combined with rarely. Faccio raramente colazione a casa. Vado spesso e volentieri al bar. I rarely have breakfast at home. I often go to the bar. Meaning that going to the bar happens more often than being at home for breakfast. While if you never do something, then you have to use mai.
Mai, mai.
But be careful because mai has to be used in a negative sentence. Non faccio mai colazione. I never have breakfast. So literally it's I don't ever have breakfast at the bar. Io non faccio mai colazione al bar. Io non vado mai in vacanza al mare. I never spend my holidays at the sea. Non vado mai al mare. Non guardo mai video. I never watch videos. And even when you use almost never, so quasi mai, non vado quasi mai al bar. Still negative sentence, ok? Non faccio quasi mai colazione al bar, solo ogni tanto. Only sometimes. Quando sono stanca, when I'm tired, which is always, sempre. Okay, so to sum up, going to the most frequent to the least one, we have sempre, always, spesso, often, ogni tanto, sometimes, or raramente, rarely, and mai, never, or quasi mai, almost never, and quasi sempre, almost always, if you want to add a slight possibility that it doesn't always happen. One last thing, I have a question for you, and I also want to tell you how to ask how often. So my question is, quanto spesso studi italiano? How often do you study Italian? Or ogni quanto studi italiano? Same meaning.
Quanto spesso? Ogni quanto?
So yeah, let me know in the comments how often you study Italian, how often do you watch our videos? And if you like this and want to learn more about Italian language, then like and subscribe. Thank you. I see you soon. Ciao ciao.